Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Camp Modern Sales, Canoes, and Conversion Rates. We're talking about navigating sales success in turbulent waters, which is definitely topical right now. I'm Brandon Ciampanelli. I lead go-to-market productivity at Brex. With me today, we have a wonderful panel of esteemed guests. I'll kick it over to Cathy Hardin, CRO of InstaWorks.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. Cathy Hardin, Chief Revenue Officer of InstaWork, been here about 2 years. Turbulent times indeed, although still a lot of room for optimism. Prior to this, I was at HomeAdvisor / Angie's List for about 15 years total.
Awesome. Thank you, Cathy. We also have Tammy Sexton over at Skyflow.
Hi, happy to be here. I've been on Modern Sales Pros before, so it's an honor to be back with these great speakers. And I agree with Cathy, turbulent times, again, for sure. I was with Launch Darkly previous to Skyflow as VP of Sales, so thanks for having me.
Absolutely, welcome. And then lastly, we have Andrew Johnston over at Superhuman.
Everybody, this is my first time on Modern Sales Pros. I am currently at Superhuman. This is my third week, so brand new to the company, navigating the turbulent times today. Prior to this, I spent about 1.5 years at a company called Scale AI, and then was at Twilio SendGrid prior to that. Really looking forward to the discussion today.
Likewise. Yeah, good time to join a new company, I'm sure. And this is actually my second time at Modern Sales Pro as well. I'm really excited to be here. Lastly, I was on the panel, now I'm moderating, so hopefully I do the moderator job justice. Let's jump into it. I know we have a lot of topics to discuss today. I want to kick it off and talk a little bit about that, sort of turbulent waters. We have right now, the macro environment, nothing short of unpredictable, right? Kind of challenging time for most sales teams. Tammy, I guess given, the rapidly changing space that you operate in, I am curious to hear maybe what major hurdles Skyflow anticipates and maybe how you're readying the team to handle them today.
I would say major hurdles, obviously in this economy, all the AEs have to double down on ROI, right? So for what we sell, a do nothing concept is not, it's out of the question. We sell aspirins, not vitamins. Customers have to do something with their PII, so we've got that advantage, but we are still up against competitors. So it's very important for the AEs to be looking at really an ROI type sale. It's really important for them to be finding pain, rubbing salt in the wound instead of showing up and doing a 30-slide PowerPoint presentation, asking the right questions. And then for our business in particular, and I don't know if my colleagues share this, but we tend to do business with there's some very large companies like IBM, and we have a ton of startups. And when we do business with a startup, they may or may not be in business a year later. So we've had a little bit of churn due to that. It's nothing to do with the product or the company. The company that we sell to simply isn't around. We're doing our best to offset that, but there's only so much that you can do as well. So sometimes when that happens, it's more of me pulling the AE aside saying, hey, hang in there with me. It's not your fault. Let's keep moving.
Absolutely. Yeah. Gone are the days of showing up and throwing up with slides, right? We have to be very, very intentional about building business value. Cathy, anything you would add from your perspective?
Yeah, I think very similar. So at InstaWork, we're providing a staffing alternative to a traditional staffing agency. And so 2 years ago, a lot of people needed flexible labor. Labor market was a lot tighter. That's changed a bit. So our partners' usage has changed. The opportunity is still there, but I think the segmentation and that discovery of who really are the partners that might need flexible labor today. And so, 2 years ago, a little bit of an easier, wider shot. Now I think just narrowing the aperture and really trying to have, in partnership with RevOps, who are the partners that need us most right now, and how can we really make the best of every ounce of sales effort currently.
Yeah, definitely honing in on your ICP right now, really focusing on customers that are going to derive the most value and that we can deliver the most value for. Andrew, you're in a very competitive space as well. I know you're new to Superhuman, but probably no stranger to competition. Anything you'd add from your perspective?
Yeah, I think we're really trying to hone down on who are, if you guys know that Superhuman, very fanatical user base. And so what we're trying to figure out is who are those users and who is really going to perpetuate Superhuman inside their organization. And so we're looking at not only startups who do that, right? So think of 20 to 50 seat companies, but also we're starting to see adoption where you have very high powered positions inside larger organizations, enterprises, and let's say mid-enterprise who have and are using Superhuman. how do we get those people to push the product down to their teams because they're seeing great usage on it. And so we're really thinking through how we target those users and then work with them to really convey the message and the power of Superhuman in the organization.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's, I guess I'll address the panel here, but from your experience, has there ever been an economic challenge, right? Or something major that we viewed as sort of a blessing in disguise? I know there was some instances of businesses seeing an uptick from COVID. I don't know if there's anything you all can relate or share a story on.
I'm happy to jump in. I was at Twilio in the midst of COVID. So I saw a massive scale up from that. It was uncertain times when you think back to, March, April of 2020, and then the business really took off. And the adoption that we saw during that time was just absolutely wild. We learned a lot, and there were certainly a lot of mistakes made, that happened post when that depression came in. However, it was a very interesting time. So that was actually an uptick via the economic climate at that point in time.
And the people that are available right now, like there's really good talent available. We throw a rec out there and we get like 20 really qualified applicants, and we have 3 A players to choose from at the end of the day. It's insane.
It's true, right? I mean, now we have, COVID put us in this distributed workforce, right? We have talent is distributed everywhere. Now you have a lot of uncertainty, a lot of, layoffs and setbacks at certain companies. Talent floods the market again. And again, that talent is everywhere. So good insights, how do we scoop up and make sure that we're staying on top of that, even though it seems as a negative, right? There's some positive or silver linings to that as well. And we certainly saw that here. I mean, at Brex, you think about the whole SVB situation, right? We weren't sure what was going on. We made a quick decision to step in. And so that ended up being, a really positive thing for us here as well, to make sure that we could be on top of supporting startups, right? And being available to do that as well. So there's always a silver lining if you really kind of keep your eyes open for it, right? Let's switch gears here. Let's talk a little bit about aligning your go-to-market strategy. I think we call this paddle synchronization. If we stay on the theme here, right? If we're not aligned, you're kind of paddling a canoe with oars facing the wrong direction and kind of go in circles. So I think I'll kick it over to you again, Andrew. So, you think about Superhuman, you all have redefined email productivity. As a newcomer, you come with a diverse background. So how do you plan to maybe bring some of that experience to Superhuman? How might that compare or contrast to, some strategies you've used in the past?
Yeah, I think it's really going to be about simplification at Superhuman. Coming into the org, our SDR team is actually pretty distributed from the AE org, which is uncommon. The AEs are doing a bunch of different things of AM plus AE work. So really simplification around who is owning new revenue expansion or new revenue acquisition, and then how are the SDRs supporting that motion. I think to your point, we have a lot of different paddles and everyone's doing a lot of different rowing, but we need to get the different groups rowing in the same direction. And so that's what I'm focused on, is just simplifying, making it hyper focused that we can go after and go get new revenue, which is the main goal within that really core ICP. I think previous to that, both at scale and then also at Twilio and SendGrid, Twilio and SendGrid, I was in the rapid scale growth phase. So it was, how do we go do everything at once and how do we do it as fast as possible and just get users? And at scale, we were on the hinge of AI and the boom that we saw with that. And so it was thinking through, what are the right companies that are going to expand and use AI infrastructure to go out and push things like the models they're building in the environment today. So it's a little bit different, but it's really important that we focus.
Yeah, love that. Staying centered on the customer as well, right? Honing in again, back on your ICP, making sure that we're talking to the right people at the right time, making sure that everybody's focused on that as an end goal as well. Tammy, anything from your perspective? I know you've been integral to Skyflow's success. I imagine with your business, there's privacy and sort of business needs to have to coincide. How do you harmonize your go-to-market strategy, make sure everybody's swimming in the same direction or rowing in the same direction?
That's really hard. We've got more of a problem with like the AEs close a deal and they give it to the customer experience group, and then 6 months passes and the customer is not in full implementation. So like my challenge is more like, how do I keep the AEs involved after the deal is closed, because they're closest to the economic buyer and they can push on the EB to say, hey, you bought this, you're wasting time and money, you got to get up and running. So I'd love to hire a separate customer success organization, a renewals manager. I'm looking right now for a partner and global head of partnerships and alliances, but you also have to weigh that with burn. And you don't want to, you want to make sure that you're properly balanced, but it's a problem. And until we get like another year or two passes, you have to make do with the resources that you have. So how do you do that? It's not easy.
Yeah, for sure. And we see a little bit of that here too, right? You think about just that handoff. It's so pivotal, right? The sales funnel has sort of changed. I love this concept of the bow tie model, right? Where you get to that point where that transition happens and then you continue to grow the relationship and the business from there. I see especially sales methodologies speaking the same language, talking about the same business value to be really helpful. And but it's a challenge now, especially more than ever, because everything's up for renewal, everything's up for evaluation. Anything you would add from your perspective, Cathy?
Yeah, I think for us right now, it's a return to the fundamentals, right? I think some of the success over the last couple of years can sometimes mask, right, that maybe the undercurrent of what we've built is not quite as strong, especially as we've scaled. 2 years ago, we had 20 sellers. We just crossed about 200. And so there's been a lot of growth. And I think it's now just how do we go back and shore up some of that key infrastructure about how we scale people and how we make people successful. So yeah, a lot of it, and back to sort of echo Andrew, how do we just simplify, right? When you've got 20 people, complexity is acceptable. When you've got 200 people, that complexity really starts to multiply. And so how do we just go back through and try to simplify the process overall?
I love that. Yeah, so important going back to the basics. Let's talk about that actually for a moment. So talk about ensuring sustainable and consistent revenue growth. I think a lot of that can start from ensuring you have the right systems, the right sales engines, the right metrics that you could look at. I think to go to your point, Cathy, actually, is there anything that you think about when it comes to building the right engine, or how are you focused on, I guess, maintaining growth in sort of this unpredictable gig economy that you operate in?
Yeah, I think part of it's streamlining, right? So including systems and tools as processes, and just, how do you just create a repeatable process that a new hire can pick up really quickly, that they don't have to be in seat a long time. So yeah, simplification and streamlining is part of it. And then part of what I'm also focused on is just how do we create a portfolio approach? Like you said, it's a little unpredictable out there right now, and things aren't going to go exactly how we thought they would. So how do we make sure we're staying focused on the core sustainability? And then how are we placing maybe some new bets on different verticals or different customer types that maybe could start to build to fruition in the next 6 to 8 months?
Yeah, absolutely. And Andrew, too, because you've obviously got the background in AI, right? You've seen that. We're now seeing a massive influx of all these AI productivity tools. I guess I'd love to hear from your perspective, too. Is there maybe, or I guess, how do you see AI evolving the sales role, right? We think about predictability, productivity. How do you see AI maybe playing into what we're talking about, which is oversimplifying things?
Yeah, I think, excuse me, it's going to be really exciting. The way that I view it is not a replacing of AEs, AMs, SDRs. I think it's a enhancement. And so I'm a huge believer in, especially seeing a lot of the models, and actually at scale, we trained a lot of the models. They are not ready to do any replacing yet. And so I think when I think of what's going to happen is, how do you make every IC in seat become more effective? And I think we're going to enter a world very quickly where AEs, AMs, CSMs, the entire go-to-market org, if you are using the right tool suite of AI to enhance your productivity, you're going to become super in your role. And if you're not doing that, you're going to fall behind purely because you can't move as fast or as nimble as the people who are using those tools. And so it's finding the right tool suite that's going to enable your team to be those superpowers. I think as a downstream effect of that, we're probably going to see smaller sales teams over time. And I think that's a good thing because it enables everyone to move faster, but you're going to have more productivity per head than we've historically had in the past. Yeah,
I love that. It's a way to supplement, or to, it's human centered or human focused, but the AI is assisting, right? It's reducing a lot of the mundane work that most SDRs, most sales reps, they sort of fumble with. I'm definitely no stranger to it here. I use it in our enablement world, trying to get things started, trying to simplify my life. I'm focused on productivity as well. But I'd love to hear from the other panel members. Do we see, or what are your thoughts on maybe the traditional sales model becoming obsolete, right, as we move towards this future of AI and automation? Do you believe that it'll replace SDRs, or do you kind of agree with where Andrew's going?
I think that sales, and even like SDRs, it's a lot of science, but it's also a little bit of art. And I think that art piece is the piece that's going to be hard to replace. I see AI making, one SDR do the work of 4, but I don't know in the near future if it's going to necessarily replace an SDR, because sometimes you can do things as an SDR, like you're trying to get a meeting with the CIO of XYZ company, and you go research that person, and you go watch a video that they did 2 years ago, and your email to them references something that they did in the video. That's personalization at scale. Maybe AI will get there someday, but I don't know that it's going to be in the next, couple of years. Same thing with the AEs. I mean, if you get, what Cathy said, get back to the basics, finding pain and then rubbing salt in the wound when you talk to the EB. Hey, I heard you have, this problem. How's that affecting you? Maybe AI will get there someday. I don't know what's going to be in the next couple of years.
Yeah, not quite there yet. Good to hear from Andrew saying that that's the case as well. Cathy, anything you'd add?
No, I agree with that. I think I'm most excited for AI to like help with the burnout tasks, like you said, right? Like just the stuff that's mundane that just takes away from the actual art, to Tammy's point. And so, yeah, I think we're really focused on whether it's updating Salesforce or like pulling out insights managers can coach on at scale, or giving insights that you can talk to the prospect about. But yeah, I don't think it replaces. I think it augments, and hopefully, especially on the pieces that just drive salespeople crazy.
Yeah, I'd love for us to get to a day where AI updates Salesforce for all the reps automatic. I'm sure sales reps would love that as well. They'd hear less from folks.
I don't think we're that far away.
I don't either.
I don't think so either. Yeah.
I can see AI listening to Gong or Chorus, whatever you use, and then just porting those notes over. If the AE is doing their job at the end and they follow up with next steps before letting the customer get off the call, why can't AI do that? I think we're going to be there soon. Update the forecast category if you hear the customer say this.
Yeah, it's true. I always play devil's advocate though, because I spent about a decade on the sales front before moving into enablement, and it doesn't take that long. I got to tell the reps today, it doesn't take that long. You just got to do it. But if AI can do it, even better. There's less excuses.
Yeah.
I love what you said though. That there's this art as well. I think some of the best salespeople in the world are, they're half rigor and process, and then they're the other side, which is this emotional intelligence, this, ability to think creatively, solve problems. Let's stay on the theme of like, navigating or surviving in the wild of sales. If you could, I'd love to hear from the panel, from each of you. Like, there's one survival skill that you'd say you rely on most in your role today. What is that particular skill, and maybe why? We can start with Cathy and then go to Tammy and Andrew.
This is what I rely on? Yeah,
one in your role today.
Yeah, I would say like the most important thing I try to keep at the forefront is just to protect and take care of your people, right? It is so unknown today, right? You're trying to update forecasting, year-over-year comps are impossible. You've got the next quarter coming up. And so I think it can be easy to get lost in the weeds of how you're going to move the number. And I think it's helpful to remember, like, it's a really uncertain time for sales reps, and selling from a heart and mindset of fear is not a great place to be. And so I think it's just trying to give your team some comfort and make sure that you are, showing them some love while you're trying to chase down this revenue target. So for me, it is trying to keep a people first mentality is my survival instinct, because if you make it to the other side of the river, to use the canoe analogy, and you get to the other side with all the revenue and your team is no longer in the boat, you're going to have a problem. So I think it's just keeping team front of mind. Yeah. Staying people focused, having that empathy is huge, leading from the front. Don't want to end up as a castaway. Tammy, how about you?
I agree with Cathy. I mean, if you're a good AE, you are your biggest critic. And if you have a missed quarter and you have that big deal that you didn't get in, like, I don't need to bust anybody's chops. Like, they'll bust their own if they're really good. And everybody I hire does. In fact, I take the opposite approach. Sometimes, you have to call them and say, hey, you're doing great. I listen to your calls. You do this right. You do this right. You do this right. Like, hang in there. I think when the economy was going well, you could really, and I'm a data-driven person, so I love to use data and sit down with AEs. But right now, like, I've got some of my best AEs on the top of the board from a prospecting perspective and advancing the stages perspective. And they're, some of them are not doing as well as you would expect. So it's more of a, hey, hang in there. I got your back. And I think that that's the best approach right now. That's my secret weapon, just being compassionate and understanding that they're not always going to kick ass. Sometimes they need a little pick me up.
Definitely. Even so much harder too in a distributed workforce, right? You're not in the sales pit anymore, where you can kind of lean on your sales teams or your manager in real time. It's hard. It can be isolating, especially during this challenging time. So I love that. How about you, Andrew?
Cathy and Tammy said it very, very well. I would just say for me, it's trust as I come into the organization. Because the faster that they trust me and to give me information, the faster that I can make the right changes or iterate on the process. So building that trust with the entire go-to-market org is super important. And the second thing that I would add to that is just we are a very product-driven company and product-driven product. And so having that relationship with the product team, historically here, I think there's been a little bit of that classic, church and state, right? We don't mess with the product. Sales is now coming in. We're trying to be more of a sales-led company. So how do I build that trust? Because the faster that we can iterate on our product and launch new features, the more our ROI we're driving and making ourselves differentiated in the market. And so it's those two things, really. Trust, I think, in both situations.
Yeah, and how do you build trust? Like, I mean, I'd love to hear from all the panel, but how do you ensure that trust maintains consistency, right, throughout everything, right? You see all the uncertainty in the market. You have a lot of folks being let go. There's obviously performance measures. Like, how do you make sure or maintain that trust with sales teams during such a time?
Did you want to start with anybody in particular, Brandon?
Whoever wants to take it, kind of throw it out.
My perspective, just like genuinely give a shit. Just care. And from the heart, and you can't fake it.
Well said.
I don't know what else to say.
Anybody add anything there?
Yeah, I would say, don't make promises you can't keep. It is really hard right now, right? There are things that you can fully commit to, and there are going to be things that you can't fully control or know what's around the corner. And so I think to Tammy's point, it's like caring, being open and transparent, and being, honest. If you don't know, you don't know, and just share with the team how you're thinking about what might be next, even if you can't fully commit to what that might be.
I would agree, and actually, Tammy, give a shit was a value at scale. But so I think it's a really important one. I also think the transparency is really important around what you're thinking. No surprises is kind of what I like to say. Of, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, even if it's something that maybe impact people's roles. Trying to be as visible as possible. Obviously, respecting what you can and cannot say in certain situations. But I think that's the most important.
Yeah, well said. I think that consistency over time, that psychological safety that you all give to your sales teams is so important. I want to go back to just talk a little bit about like building this sustainable model, right? There's this old saying, revenue cures all or revenue solves all problems. I guess, Cathy, I'll go over to you. Do you agree with that statement? Do you think it oversimplifies things? Like, how do you view that revenue solves all problems statement?
Yeah, I think I agree and disagree with it. I think it's dangerous, right? I think revenue is the table stakes, right? If you don't have that, everything else is harder and things are going to get really bad really fast. But I do worry sometimes that, like, back to my prior point, I think revenue can mask things at the same time. And so I think you got to be careful not to get caught in a complacent motion that, like, if you've got the revenue, everything else will follow. Because if you're not building the core sustainability behind it, you will find yourself with a lot of revenue in one moment and then it sweeps out from under you. So I think it's just careful about revenue can solve all. And you also got to be careful about cutting corners. If you build a culture where revenue excuses all, then I think that also becomes a problem. And so it is really important, but with some caveats.
Definitely.
I couldn't agree more. And I'm a fan of leading indicators, like looking at meetings and pipeline. And just because you had a good quarter this quarter doesn't mean you're going to have a good quarter next quarter. So you still have to constantly go back to the data that is going to be, revenue is great, but you need to sustain it. And it does mask some things. Sometimes you can have an AE that has a really huge deal that was dropped on their lap because maybe the CIO had a relationship with your CEO. And so they bring them in and they land this huge deal. Doesn't necessarily mean that person's a rock star, even though they're at the top of the charts right now. So keeping a pulse on what they're doing and making sure that the revenue is sustainable in the next quarter and the quarter after that is going to be critical to long-term success.
So true, right? We need to inspect what we expect, right? And there's that other saying of, sort of what gets measured gets managed, right? And so you think about that, exactly what you just said, that large deal, there's a lot of intricacies that go into that large deal, the right behaviors, having the right, going back to Salesforce, making sure we're looking at the right inputs. So it's so important to stay on top of that as well. Andrew, anything from your end?
The other thing I would add is I think it was well said by Cathy and Tammy. I just look for, are we making the right deals? I think it's very easy, especially as we think about going up market. You can start to sell the wrong types of deals where you're pulling on product. You start to erode that trust in product, and it creates a very bad situation. So thinking through what is the sustainable deal that we want to close, and then if we're doing things that are not scalable, how are we doing that in the right way to go inform future processes?
Yeah, well said. Awesome. Well, we're coming close on time. I want to, going back on theme, we're sort of gathering around the campfire, sharing some stories. I'd love to hear maybe from each of you. Again, we'll go Cathy, Tammy, Andrew, but if you all can maybe share a story from either your own sales journey or your own sales experience that's left an indelible mark on you that you'd want to pass along to our audience.
Yeah, so I think maybe a little less of a story, but something we're talking a lot about. My VP of sales here talks a lot about smooth seas don't make good sailors, right? And back to your point about looking for the silver lining. I think these are times where you can build really strong team camaraderie. Rally around a common cause. I think it breeds creativity, and so I think like there have been COVID was one of those moments. I've been around long enough to say the 2008 scary time was one of those moments. So I think like not overreacting and sort of just assuming doom and gloom, but really look for those opportunities to rally a team and look for those creative opportunities that can actually help you be stronger, whether it's product positioning, infrastructure, the team environment. I think you can take these opportunities and look for the silver lining. So I would encourage everybody to do that.
Love that. How about you, Tammy?
I guess it's not a story as much as it was just a really good piece of advice. John McMahon, if you know who he is a huge mentor of mine. He wrote the book, The Qualified Sales Leader. And I had a situation where I really needed to lean on him to say, give me the courage to speak up, to get back to the basics, to get back to the sales process, find pain, build champions, show up for work. I guess it's really good to have mentors. And it's really good to have people you can rely on to call and say, like, am I crazy? We're not doing this. And I feel like I need to speak up. But then some people around me say, no, that's just not right. And anyway, I guess my piece of advice and parting is like, have a good mentor, lean on that person. Don't be afraid to speak up. Even if it's like, I was afraid when I called John about this, that I was showing a vulnerability to someone I admired, who was really strong. And he's like, nope, someone had to tell me this when I was a CRO. So get out there, stand your ground, and go back to the basics.
Love that. That mentor relationship is so powerful, especially, some of these folks coming out of college, this is their first time being in a sales role, and they're thrown into a very turbulent time, to go back to that, right? And so it's, how do you navigate that? What have you seen before that's shaped your experience or that's helped you sort of navigate through it? And if you can pass that on or share that wisdom, it's so important. Andrew, on your end?
Yeah, kind of similar. I don't have a single story to pull out, but I will kind of pull back to a couple of big deals where I've been involved, either myself as an AE or as the lead on the team. And one of my mentors told me in a similar fashion, it's so important that we're in this and we're going to win it together, or we're going to lose it all together. And we actually would, as an organization at Twilio, reprimand the rep if they lost the deal without getting people involved. So if they lost the deal, like it could be $1 million deal, if the right people were involved and we lost it as a team, that is okay. We'll take the learnings. But if you tried to be the hero and do everything and didn't alert people and bring it into the deal, you are going to get really reamed out, because at the end of the day, sales is really a team sport. I think a lot of people forget that. And it's always like, what did the AE do? What did the CSM do? And I think it's the wrong way to think about it. We got to be fighting in the trenches together, and we got to leverage our partnerships cross-functioning with product, with engineering. And so I think that's a super important learning for me. And I've actually been that rep who has tried to close a deal alone, and it is not a fun experience. So
I love your vulnerability. You're like, hey, I did that. It's not right, but I did it.
Yeah, never lose alone. They always say, right? Yeah, and it's hard because you want that autonomy, or you want to breed that autonomy to allow people to make those tough decisions. But when it comes to high stakes deals, when it comes to just being able to collaborate well and ensure that, again, we know where the gaps are. Why did we lose the deal? Where could we have potentially won the deal had we brought in more folks? Selling is a team sport, to your point. So I love that perspective as well. Awesome. Well, as we wrap, I think I want to just express my thanks to Cathy, Tammy, and Andrew for sharing your valuable insights and bearing with a lot of the river puns and things that we're going through at Camp Modern Sales. Again, to Modern Sales Pros for creating such an incredible community, hosting these types of forums. And then to our audience, thank you for joining. As we've all said here, remember, sales is a journey. Don't go alone. It's all part of the adventure. And so until next time, stay curious, stay adaptable, and we'll see you all at the next Modern Sales Pro event. Thanks, everyone.